We're going to be talking about what's going on under the pyramids. Hey, what about those demonstrators that are out here with passion tonight? We're going to try to have a look at that and what's the proper way to get your point across. Welcome to the show, Les. What's up tonight? What's on your mind?
Oh, thank you, Doug. The What are the spiritual ramifications of the possible finding of life on Mars?
Wow. How about rediscovering life on Mars? I'm of the opinion that we've been there before, and we migrated from the red planet to Earth. I should say we used to visit Earth. It was kind of like a Florida for people on Mars. They would come over and visit Earth. There was a story we did on the Blog Talk Radio show. It was about this. It was called "The Boy from Mars." He remembered in detail how in the time before time, I guess you would say, that it was a regular visiting place where there were things on Mars that were happening, and they would come to Earth, and vice versa. Apparently, it was a close relationship with them. He seemed to remember himself being in the military, but apparently, trips from Mars to here were exciting and expected and everyday occurrences, kind of like us going maybe to, I don't know, Europe or India or some faraway exotic place. So given that that's speculative, and I understand that people might say, hold on a minute, I don't know about that. Okay, something happened in the cosmos, something happened where the planets collided. That's why you have the rings around Saturn, because and those meteors that come by every so often. Hey, we're revisiting where that collision took place, and we're collecting some space junk or garbage or meteorites that are coming. That's why there's big chunks and little chunks, and they keep on going around in circles because they used to be in our solar system, in my humble opinion and what my researches have been. So, what are the spiritual ramifications about the red planet? Well, when I look at those pictures from that rover or that helicopter that's on there, I feel like, wow, I'm fascinated with it, but it looks familiar. So
Hmm.
I'm wondering, have I been there? I don't know, in a previous existence, perhaps. So the spiritual ramifications are that we're reaching out into our solar system. We sent Voyager out years ago with the old welcome card, and that's another story for another day. Maybe instead of a welcome card, it's a warning, look out, here come the humans, or the earthlings, I should say. And maybe there'll be acceptance or maybe not, but again, that's a question for a different day. So the spiritual ramifications. Well, we're reaching out into the universe, we're going to different planets, and I think that's symbolic of how our spiritual influence and our spiritual mind is growing. That we're expanding out into the cosmos, like these wonderful pictures we have behind you and myself. It is an expansion of the human mind, the human consciousness. No one that I know has ever been able to say, ha ha, this is what human consciousness is, and describe it. It's all over the place. They call it intellect, subconscious mind, soul mind, metaphysical aspects, intuitive or psychic minds. It's all over. What is this human mind, this consciousness? When you study the human mind, even casually, it's fascinating. So why not that we're reaching out into the great beyond in a physical sense, going from here to there? I mean, let's look at it this way. The moon's going to be a gas station. Mars is the first stop on the tour, and we're going to head on well way out past Pluto, and we're going to discover other planets and other civilizations, perhaps other what we would call, as our good friend um, Robert Grisell once said, when the heavens and earth were made in the beginning, so God must have made all the planets and all the neighbors and family out there. So we're going to get back and hook up with our brothers and sisters. Wouldn't that be something? We think of ourselves arrogantly, perhaps, as the center of the universe and in days gone by, the only creation of humanoid type people. Well, what if we're backward? We've suffered the disaster, and we're looking back. We're reaching up. Why are we so fascinated with space? Well, because we've been there,
Hmm.
and we want to go home. We want to go back. And then, of course, as we understand space, which is almost impossible, a finite mind cannot comprehend the infinite, maybe there are wormholes, maybe there are stargates, maybe there are secret passageways from here to there. And our cousins, as Robert Grisell postulated, was that they're out there. They're our neighbors, they're our family, because we're all created in creation by God Almighty. So, okay, let's go home. Let's go visit. Let's go see what's out there. And I don't know about this travel by, warp speed or light years or whatever, but I'm sure there's going to be some sort of a Stargate discovery where we can get from here to way over somewhere over there, like that. So, what's the spiritual ramifications? It's our ability to reach out as spiritual beings locked up in this physical body, that we can go back to these dimensions above. And if we look in good books, from the ancient Indian Vedas to the Old Testament, we can see there's hints about climbing up a ladder, about beings coming down from heaven, about gods being here before the ancient times, before Mosi and those others. And so, even if you look at the Egyptian gods or the Roman gods, they're like different shapes, but they're still humanoid. They have different faces or different heads. And so I'm wondering, I'm curious, are they out there? Are they over here or over there? I don't know. What would you think, Les? You would like to take a trip out to space and see? I mean,
Well, it was interesting. I saw this. It was called the Disclosure Project. It was took place back in I think 2001 or something. And these people came forward who had very high credentials in the service. They had since retired, so they could, actually speak about their what their roles. And this one person had said he was part of the program to retrieve downed objects, and he said we have been visited by over 100 different races.
wow.
So it's got to be crowded out there.
You look at that picture behind me or you, and those are just stars. And around every star, there's multiple planets. I would think so. The highway to heaven is right there. And so, yes, if there's hundreds, if not billions, of planets like Earth, which makes perfect sense. I mean, I forget, it was a famous person once said, it's illogical to think that we're the only ones in the universe, that life doesn't exist elsewhere. But again, in some of those visitations in those ancient gods where they have humanoid bodies, but they have the head of a bird or a dog or a bear or a wolf or a snake or a fish. I mean, that's what we look at. We consider those animal type appearances. But what if that's how they exist on other places? They just have a different shape, a different face, different
Mm.
hands, perhaps. I mean, we're speculating here, and I know I can see the audience going, well, okay, maybe, possibly, but I hope the wolf man doesn't come down from space and terrorize us. You know, I hope he's the wolf man like that famous radio wolf man. He's going to come down to entertain us. But yeah, I mean, the point being is that as we reach out and there's different species, naturally, I mean, what we think we're the proper appearance, right, of humans. Well, what if we're not? What if we're some sort of aberration? What if, like apes developed in a different way on another planet, like we see these movies, Planet of the Apes? It's possible.
Mm.
There's intelligence. What if the animals that are here now, like horses, they're extremely intelligent. We love them. We like to be with them, and they have their own state of mind. They're like, oblivious to us, right? Like, we're oblivious to them, rather, I should say. It's like they run around, they munch on grass, they go where they want, We put them to work and they oblige us. We ride them and we love them and they're happy. Wow. Maybe human nature could take a hint from horses, however. I'd be when you see these ancient carvings of these beings, they're sitting like on motorcycles, or they're sitting in capsules. They're sitting like a pilot would sit into an airplane.
Yeah,
You
even
look
the
at
instrumentation is there. I mean, you're a pilot. You can recognize the instrumentation.
Yeah, there's a lever forward and back. Step on the gas, go real fast. That's all that counts. So the point being is, what if these carvings in the walls of ancient temples are accurate? That there are beings out there now that can move from one planet to another, one solar system to another, one galaxy to another. Wow. I did have a vision, I'll share it with our audience. I had a vision where I saw a big white smoke ring. I called it a smoke ring until I was talking to my friend at Coast to Coast, Richard Serrett, and he said, "Oh, you mean a Stargate?"
Oh,
And
wow.
like a ton of bricks, it hit me. And through this smoke ring were coming off world vehicles, one behind the other, like it was a train. slowly moving across the sky. So I saw that and I wondered, oh my gosh, what's the military going to do about that? Then I thought, nothing.
Yeah.
what, what can they
What
do?
could they do?
But I did see it, and so that's what. Maybe in tonight's show, maybe there are other people who want to send us a little. I think we're taking emails or we're taking people that can chime into the show right now. We're live, and you can ask the question, and we have the wizard behind the curtain here who'll give us your questions. And so please feel free to do so. Have you had such an experience, my friends? Have you had similar, smoke rings or stargates? Have you seen that? Let us know. Chime in, and when we'll get you in the chat here, and Les will pick that up, or the wizard will put it up for us. So yeah, I mean, what's my feeling about outer space? I can hardly wait. I can hardly wait. I hope, I pray that they're going to be friendly, and they're gonna not going to look at us and say, "Hey, you guys, you're up to no good again. Last time you blew up the world, we had to come and clean up the mess. So we're coming now, and we're going to take you back to kindergarten. We're going to take all your bomb toys away, and we're going to teach you all over again on how to get along." Oh my gosh, what would that be like? Wow.
What about the souls on this planet who will have trouble dealing with extraterrestrial life of any sort, even if it's bacterial? Because some people here on the planet, we know that they're not as evolved as others. How can we help them to accept this new finding?
Well, I think it's a matter of strength. If we find somebody, something, life, and it's controllable by us, like mosquitoes, okay, or birds, and they're like that, well, those people that have little issue problem with I don't believe it, they believe the social media baloney stuff, or they believe the websites that are on the dark side, and they think that's the gospel. There's no need to even, we can't convince them, nor should we try, because they have to come to this realization themselves.
Mm.
So we who are accepting of this and would find credence in having another life force come to us. I mean, think about it. What if kitty cats turned out to be from Alpha Centauri or the Palladians or something like that, and they could talk to us, and they were wise, and they had flying vehicles, and they had devices? We'd listen to them. Sort of like the day the Earth stood still. You remember that one where
Oh, yeah.
uh, an advance party came, and he held up a little translator for the universe, and some soldiers shot the device, and well, there goes the neighborhood. we, we can't talk to anybody now. It just blew up the translator. So in that situation, it would be awkward if there was an appearance like the day the Earth stood still. They come down, first of all, where would the spacecraft land? Most likely Brazil, because that's the most visible landmass from space. So it sticks out. It's all anyway. The largest landmass. This is probably where they would go. They wouldn't come to Washington or London, Ontario, or Moscow, or you know Beijing. They would come to where the largest landmass was. Oh, wait a minute. What about all those national lines and all those carvings and all those in the soil? You can see these shapes that look like maybe somebody from outer space has already got this place
Mm.
tattooed and marked out. Where are those places located? In the southern hemisphere. Hmm. Would that be not another place where they would come, because that's their old territory? They just have to look down and read the
Mm.
maps, and they go, "Oh, here we are. We're at that place, third rock from the sun. That's the one. We're in the right place." Okay, so people not comprehending, not wanting to comprehend, people who are doubting. There are some people, you tell them the sky's blue, they'll argue up and down that it's not, because they're right. And you go, okay, thank you, you're right. And you move on, because wasting your time arguing with these people who are never going to agree anyway, you're the fool. So you move on. So what about the people who do believe or want to believe, like us? We're open-minded enough. Well, we would listen. And then, of course, if these beings are superior to us, armament, technology, they would look at us as if we were going into an island that was covered with ants. You know, think about that. What if
Mm.
these beings, those giant beings that are carved in Egyptian walls, and the statues that are of giant beings over top of little beings. What if they come back? What chance do we have to do? Well, first of all, I hope they negotiate. Otherwise, zoom, you line up. You're all going to be miners now, and you're going to be slaves, or you're going to dig holes, or you people are going to serve us. Back in the day, there's rumors about these beings wanted gold. That's why they came to the earth. And when they ran out of the digs for gold, they left. And then
Oh,
we were on our own. And that's why seemingly gold is so important. Basically, up until the electronic age, gold wasn't much used for anything other than, money.
right.
Or
Yeah, that's right. I think salt was the most precious thing
before
we
that,
had. Yeah.
because you're not worth your salt. Famous ancient saying or Roman saying, meaning if you didn't do your job, or you weren't, a soldier good enough, you weren't given your handful of salt, so you weren't worth it, meaning you were pretty darn useless. So, but anyway, so interesting concept, Les. I like that idea.
Yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned, the Stargate and, possible time travel. I was watching it was an old recording of Bob Lazar. I'm sure people have heard of him. And he was describing these vehicles that they had captured or they had crash landed. They were rear engineering them. And he said that they warped time. That's how they could travel so quickly. And he said the pilots were having a problem with that because their minds weren't built for that kind of travel. But they could reach Mars. They said if they could get it working, they could probably reach Mars in like 2 or 3 hours. I thought, oh my God! So he said they literally fold space. So yeah, your vision was correct with the gate.
Well, Einstein said time is circular and it's flexible. And it was kind of like if you have a flat bed and you have a marble, if you throw the marble around this flat surface, it goes around and round and it slows down and stops. But
Hmm.
if you pull the bottom of that circle, like a spider's web, you pull it down and you throw that marble, it goes around and then it accelerates.
Uh,
And it accelerates very quickly until it gets down to that point. So, if I remember somewhere back in the eighth grade when that was, or high school when that was mentioned, all of a sudden it makes sense. If, time is not linear, time is circular, and also it's multi-dimensional. So if you can get into that, you're going in circles, right? Not a big circle very slowly, but as
right.
you sink into the bottom of it, you go faster. Hence the ability to time warp, go from one place to another. And what if when you get to the bottom of that, pull down the little web, it just dropped through another hole? Oh my gosh, you're in another galaxy or place or time. So time travel, the fourth dimension, is our next big discovery, over and above AI, I'm afraid.
Mm, mm. It's interesting how they say the pyramids might have been built by extraterrestrials, and they've been finding some very large tunnels under them. What's your take on that? Have you seen anything about that in your ability to remote view or any dreams?
Well, uh, the idea is that the pyramids are power devices. Okay, in Africa, there's all kinds of concentric rings, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller as you look down. And somebody spent a lot of time going in big circles, putting stone walls around, and then dropping down in a smaller one and a smaller one, a smaller one. But underneath runs water.
Hmm.
Water is moving under these rings. The same as the pyramids. There are caverns where water is running through them. And
Oh, wow.
so the theory is that these caverns are magnets, and they are devices that use the Earth's energy, because the Earth is one big battery. But the idea that there has to be moving water underneath it seems to be the benefit of the pyramids, causing them to be gigantic generators. The
Hmm.
configuration of them, I mean, people say, look up at Orion's belt and you can see these same shape and size. Well, maybe that's where they came from. I don't know. But the idea that they're power devices, and yes, they were built by ancient beings, whether they were earthlings or off world ones, the question is still open. But it remains as we're getting closer and closer to understanding that when I think I saw them the other day, they put device they put up against stone, and they were rubbing the stone, especially when they had these carvings in it.
Mm.
And the person was postulating that you don't need to interpret that; those are musical notes. And so you rub the stone, and he had a device was like a a microphone, and you could
Wow.
hear the stone singing. I had a similar experience in India, where near Bangalore, I went to a temple where there was a large structure that looked like a bull. It looked like a sitting bull. And I went into this place, and it was like, like this, only really, really light. And I put my hand on it. I could feel the vibration of this stone. It wasn't
Wow.
carved, and it's been there for a long time. And the people were saying, and who were in charge of the temple, saying this stone is growing. So I thought, okay, but I felt odd, and I felt the vibration, if you will. I took pictures of it inside. Not one of those pictures turned out.
Wow.
It's blank. That's the time when you used to have film, the good old
It
days.
blanked. Wow. It blanked the physical film. Oh my God.
It didn't work. It blanked them every single outside. I had pictures before I went in it. And when I came
Wow.
out of the temple, I had pictures, but that in the middle didn't. So I became aware that temples and stones have vibration, or you can there's a purpose for them. And when they're sanctified by priests, uh, and we're talking about temples now in the Far East or India and places, they're sanctified and have to be prayed over every day, or so I was told. And that keeps the vibration going. But that's why
Oh.
it takes so much time for somebody to sanctify a statue, because there has to be a lifelong commitment. And that's why those priests stay in the temples all the time. So they keep praying, and it keeps the vibration of the stone. Now, what purpose does it? I know the audience is saying, because they're really smart, our audience is really smart. And we're saying, what purpose does it make? I don't know. But I know that when you touch something or you feel something like that in a special place, you got to say, there's something to this. And then you
Mm.
see these other information where somebody's looking at these carvings. There's one block in a wall and is carved, and then the whole rest of the wall is not.
Mm.
And so if you rub it or stroke it and you have a microphone against it, apparently you can hear music or sounds. Okay. So what if that vibration is in the pyramids too? And the pyramids have this ability now is coming, discovering the use of magnets and copper wire. And the idea is if you take a magnet, a round donut magnet, and you put wire around it, and you
Mm.
connect one end to a light bulb with a receptacle, rather,
Right.
the other end to a receptacle, and you screw in the light bulb, it'll come on. It'll
Mm.
have electricity. And that, God bless my friend Robert Appel, he used to talk about, as we had him on the show, you and I, years ago, he would talk about in the ancient temples, there had to be a magical life source, because there was no, charcoal, no dust, no burn marks where candles or torches would be placed. Well, what if they had this magnetic light source?
Mm.
That would
Wow.
make sense, that they'd have illumination, the walls would be illuminated, and there'd be um, no soot. That's the word I was looking for.
Sure.
Okay, so let's bump it up and say, what if these pyramids were able to transmit through the air electricity, like Velikovsky was talking about, and like our good friend Tesla? He was able to send
Mm.
power across the air. As a matter of fact, you remember that one time last where he blew up a forest in Russia?
Oh, was that him? Oh
Yeah,
my God. Oh
yeah.
wow. I
He
didn't
sent
realize that was.
bolts of energy across and ended up in Russia, and unfortunately, it incinerated the, the
Oh
forest.
wow. Yeah.
Now, our listeners,
Tunguska something or other.
pardon?
Was Tunguska something? The Tunguska area, something like that. And
It's
it
more
was
than
they thought it was a meteor or something that came down, but it was actually Tesla.
that's right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. He's credited with it. Now, our audience is really smart. They're probably right now checking it out. It's ancient news in as much as it was back in the 70s and 80s, uh, you know, big time. It was a revelation. And of course, when Tesla did it, back in the day when he was inventing electricity and he was dealing with Niagara Falls, you know, uh, that was a real deal. So
Was that a mistake? Was that like an oopsie?
I think it's one of those things, you ever have that experience in chemistry like I did? You're making hydrogen in a test tube and you go over with a match to see and it goes and all the
Like,
hair on the back of your skin disappears. As I seem to recall I did that once. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's an oopsie. I think that's right. But
oh,
again, instead of investigating this ability, which Tesla had intended to have free electricity everywhere, the powers to be, in other words, the wealth barons, they decided to harness it and go AC or DC current, wire up the cities, and then put meters on our houses that we're paying energy for today. And I'm really fascinated with this whole idea of magnets and copper wire.
hmm,
And also, it's extrapolating into there's a whole movement in gardening now where you take coiled copper wires and you
yeah.
put a big antenna at the top and you put it around a stick and you jam it in the ground. And that is supposedly electrifying, stimulating your vegetable gardens. I did a little bit last year. I put one in one plant and none in the other, and it seemed to work. My strawberries seemed to work, grow a lot faster where the
Wow.
copper wire was. So I might try it again this year. But anyway, there's lots of news out there for our listeners and viewers to try some of this at home. Why did they always in Egyptian have a copper band around their waist or one around their arm? Why do people wear copper around their neck?
Hmm.
Might be some health benefits to that.
Right. Oh, that little, it was, a matter of fact, our good friend George Seferiadis, who had passed away some years ago, passed over to the other side. He knew a Dr. Shock. I don't know if you remember him. He was a geologist, and he was stating how the pyramids were showing, with like the Sphinx had shown signs of water erosion. So we know it was far older than what they were saying it was.
Well,
And they said at the time that Egypt didn't even exist as a nation when the pyramids were supposedly built.
the Nile used to flow east and west. There's when the space views we're seeing, you can see the old riverbed from the Nile going from almost Morocco over towards where the Nile comes out now. But
Hmm.
at some point in time, remember we were talking about water underneath the pyramids and underneath there's chambers. I have seen videos of these huge chambers and they're all scorched. Something
Hmm.
happened, and I think that was they had a nuclear accident. I'll use the word nuclear for lack of a better term, that caused this device, the pyramid, to stop. I mean, pyramids are all over the world. They're all the same. They're sort of built in the same manner. They have interlocking stones somehow, and the stones come together. Are we can't do it today. We can't. I mean, everything's possible. You'd have to have Howard Hughes here, you know,
Hmm.
the man who built the spruce goose airplane. There we go. And anyway, we'd have to have some huge technology to get the pyramid built, but they did it, and they're all over the world. And another phenomena is that some of these pyramids, especially the ones in China, have a lake of mercury underneath them. And the
Wow.
Chinese won't let exploration into these ancient tombs for religious purposes.
Whoa.
So there's got to be something to these pyramids having this connection with the planet and drawing on this free electricity. And in the early 1900s, if you check, there is a book out there, I've seen it, about patents that were established in 1901, 1902, all about electric cars and devices and
Hmm.
gardening. Just it's all coming back because
Yeah.
we have the
Hmm.
internet. we,
Yeah.
we can see. So anyway, just throwing that out to our viewers that that's someplace. This is the cutting edge. What if magnets and copper would be some sort of propulsion unit as well? What if? The point being is that on the sides of pyramids they have this long cone-shaped thing with white and black or two different colors, a cord going down to some place. And I believe that's a demonstration of these devices that even now in the Wall Street Journal there was a story about somebody who had refrigerator size device of magnets and copper, and it would supply gigantic amounts of electricity. So we're
Mm.
coming into that age, and our viewers, if you haven't heard about this, please check it out. We'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear you give us a like and subscribe to our channel as well, because we have lots of really good information for you. We're waiting for the wizard to come up here and drop us a line for people who might want to be on the chat and ask a question or two. Love to hear from you, my friends, and love you to support our show and subscribe and pass this around to all your friends. Do us a big favor. So anyway, getting back to the pyramids, Les, wouldn't that be amazing? Here comes the wizard.
Hey, here he is.
Howdy. Hey, we do have a question, but it's off the subject slightly. It's about a dream, if we have time for it, Douglas.
Well, now that we stopped the show, oh, sure.
Well, it's about aliens, so maybe it
Oh,
fits.
all right.
So a gentleman here says he had a vision, which you once said that the person had seen God Almighty, and he had seen a bright white light. And then he had another dream about a short alien-like being that communicated through thought. Uh, it held his hand and began to split the air in front of them, and at the same white light began to show. And then the being saw his reaction and said, "Oh, you can only see this once," and put everything back, I guess, because
Well,
he's only supposed to see it one time. And
Oh,
his question was, is this an actual being communicating with me?
wow. That's so many different ways. Um, this is into the metaphysical, and it's very sophisticated. So the answer is yes. It's some sort of higher consciousness, especially when they say you can only see this once. And some spiritual revelations, you only get to see them once.
mm,
Once is enough. You know, how many times do we have to tell you something? Whack. We told you once. So this is not an alien. This is a being, a sentient being, or some sort of divine being that is giving him instructions, just like the prophets of old, where we had revelations. I would say that this was along the way. You were seeing the face of God, which is a really big, bright light. And people see that. I know Les maybe had that occurrence. You see, oh my gosh, there's the sun, and you want to look away from it, but you look at it, and it doesn't hurt. That's
mm.
God. That's the beam of light that people see and report. Of course, it's subjective. People can make up whatever reference points they can to say it looked like a sun. Well, maybe it looked like a dewdrop, or maybe it looked like a puddle. Whatever somebody's um, connection in describing it doesn't do the image justice, but kind of gets the thought about it. So dealing with thoughts and this idea of being shown the universe, I would say this is a divine revelation. There's probably a lot more to this that our friend is not saying, but he's giving us the parameters of what he saw to say this is a real thing. Absolutely. What was said or shown, hopefully you remembered, because we do have a tendency to go like, wow, that's amazing. And they'll say, what was said? I don't know. I can't remember. So, but whoever that friend is on the show, thank you very much for that submission. It goes along with what we're talking about, is this reaching out into the universe. And as we do this, as we reach out, we have to reach in. And we're talking about power devices. We're talking about this new discovery, rediscovery of copper wire and magnets. Uh, Magnets on themselves fascinating. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we had a U-shaped magnet, and we were picking up nails with it. We would put iron filings around in grade 4 and put a magnet on there, and we would see the array of the magnetic field. And wasn't that interesting? And then it was on to the next lesson. But even now, when you get two magnets that are powerful, they come together real fast, and they stay together forever. How is that possible? Well, it's
Mm.
because this invisible force that Tesla said gravity, electricity, and magnetism are the same force.
Mm.
All of a sudden, it starts to make sense. Gravity is like magnetism, it's holding things together. And magnetism and gravity, like copper wire around a magnet, you produce electricity. Now, for those people who might not be too familiar, that's not a big step because when you have an electric motor or a generator, if you've ever had the privilege, you look inside and around the outside of this device is copper wire, wound and wound and wound and wound in special ways. But it's one piece of copper wire separated by pieces of paper to keep it from touching one another. And then inside, there's a device that rotates an armature and it's got magnets on it. And the magnets are AC, alternating current. They're attracting and repelling at the same time. The magnet attracts and it moves forward, and then the next magnet repels, and so it progresses further. And if you think of that, motors and generators and alternators are all the same, then the same as a simple magnet with copper wire wrapped around it and plugged into a light bulb, and the light comes on. Wow, because generators and alternators, they all produce electricity. And so all of a sudden, gee, Tesla's got something there. Magnetism and copper wire moving produces electricity. Gravity, gravity's, we know that, you step off a step, you fall down real fast. So don't need any copper wire for that one.
Yeah, wasn't Tesla, didn't he discover, I think it was called 0 point energy, which was basically energy out of the earth? That was his thing, wasn't it?
Well, as I said a few moments ago, the Earth is a giant battery. It's a giant battery, and you don't need two poles, right? I mean, electricity is going through one. It goes through a load. In other words, that bright stuff in the light bulb, and then it goes on the other side, and it goes back to the ground. If you think about that, it's one continuous movement. So the idea that electricity, coming out of the earth is a magnet, the earth is a battery, the earth has gravity in it. So naturally, the Baghdad battery was found in ancient times and it had one device in it and it had fluid inside it. And they reported it back when camels were the Cadillacs of transportation, that it produced electricity back then, right? So,
Some Cadillac.
well, I think there's a more they were called ships of the desert, I
That's
think.
right.
You know. Holy, oh my God. Talk about, jet lag. Anyway.
It's
Oh, yeah.
interesting. You touched upon, the mercury inside the Chinese pyramids. I was watching this interesting documentary. This was actually a lecture from this. He was a guy who had worked at Lockheed Martin years ago. He actually had documentary to prove it. It was a wonderful slideshow. It's probably still somewhere on YouTube. And he said the triangular ships we see are actually ours. He said they were back engineered, and he said they power them by spinning up what they call red mercury. And he said, when you take mercury and you spin up to great speed, you get anti-gravity. He said, those are ours. He said, what's the big deal? And he said, that's why they swarm the ships, because they're on maneuvers with us. He said, eventually it's going to come out. But he had an interesting point. He said, when you have these craft that can actually warp time, he said, there's a good reason why they don't allow this technology out, because he said, imagine if every Tom, Dick, and Harry had a time machine in their garage. They could wreak havoc. He said, so, they have to make sure that this technology, when we're ready to receive it, we have to have our act together. And we're not there yet.
Well, it would make sense. I mean, let's just say some Tom, Dick, or Harry gets in a device and they get into the time warp and then they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
As we said, time is circular. So they're just basically orbiting around some place where they're stuck. Meanwhile, hundreds or thousands of years are going by every minute. To them, if they're almost standing still, but that would be terrible. So, and of course, maybe there's collisions that'll occur. Maybe the air traffic controllers are on strike out there in the time warp land, and like, oh my gosh, there we lost another one. Where'd he go? I don't know. Beta Articula, I think. Milky Way. That's where So
when I was a kid, I don't know about you, Doug, but when I was a kid, we had like model rocketry. And it was Estes. It was a company called Estes. And the reason why that model rocketry was it was a typical solid propellant rocket motor. And the reason why that was invented by an engineer, this guy was a genius inventor, and he saw when during the space race, the height of the space race, everybody was wanting to launch their own rockets. So they started making these home-brewed rocket engines and getting hurt. So you can only imagine when somebody has the technology to, hey, listen, why don't we build a time machine in my garage? It's like, oh my God. So I get it. I understand why we have to really have our act together to have this kind of. And speaking of, passion, what's your take on these demonstrations, these riots that are taking place? People want to come from their hearts, but how do they not lose sight of common sense while they're doing it?
Well, not everyone is losing common sense. It's only a few. There are people who are natural agitators. There are people who they get some sort of sexual satisfaction. This is me just putting that out there. I could be right, it could be wrong. From breaking windows or seeing
Like a
people.
pyromaniac kind of.
Yeah, they get an emotional pleasure of it somehow. People with rational minds can't quite understand that. Why? Because we're rational minds. But
Mm.
there are those people that get off on things that breaking windows, taking a magnifying glass and burning ants as all little kids do it first, or some do. So the idea is that the real answer is most of us are rational, and most of the demonstrators are out there for a purpose.
Mm.
They go and they demonstrate their um, constitutional right to
Mm-hmm.
say, I disagree.
Mm.
And in any democracy or republic or any country that's run by the people, you have that right. The king can say whatever, and in a kingdom, silence is golden, or off goes your head. So the point being is, in this privilege of being able to complain, to protest, there should be some honorable reason to do so. And what's going on right now in the people with rational thinking, there's anger, there's frustration, there's sympathy for the people that are suffering at the hands of the immigration circumstances that are going on. And the people who don't like this are protesting. So the agitators, the people who are not so smart, the people who want to stir things up, or maybe they're on the other side and they're trying to cause a thing to happen, saying, see, everybody is bad because somebody broke some windows or lit a car on fire. We have to sit back and rational minds and say, okay, 5 people got arrested on Friday, 127 people got arrested on Saturday. What were they doing out there? Well, they were breaking a curfew. Or some of them, I saw this on the news, 2 people drove their motor scooters into a police line. They
Mm.
actually drove into the police line. These people are not rational. Maybe they're got their little cell phones up and they're trying to show people, their friends, about how mischievous they are, thinking the police are going to part like the Red Sea. And unfortunately, they don't. And the police are there playing for real, playing for keeps. And the people who are immature or people who are doing silly things, they're going to pay the price because they're not thinking, or they're in some sort of imaginary land, or they're the other people like we talked about who are destructive in nature. So the majority of people are out there with their heart. They remember what it was like for their parents who immigrated to the country. They
Sure.
remember that the country was started by immigration,
Mm.
forced immigration, if you will. The poor natives were there waving at these big ships as they came up to the shoreline and welcomed them in and even helped them survive through the winter time.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
the natives that were here, it was part of nature. People came on a boat, you welcome them, no big deal. And so the migration of people from all around the world to America is such that America is, I believe, the land of milk and honey that was predicted back in the Old Testament.
Oh.
It's
Okay.
land of milk and honey. There is no other country in the world like America. None. You have the First Amendment right. You can say anything you like, good, bad, or ugly. Can't do that in some of the other democracies. If you
That's true.
slander somebody's name, off to jail you go or you get sued. Not in
Mm.
America. You can say anything
Mm.
you want. So that's kind of the weakness of free speech. However, The passion is that these people are out there because they see injustice. Always injustice breeds civil unrest. When you have justice, you have civilization. And when you have civilization, you have people standing around a corner, maybe complaining about the weather, but everybody knows it's just. And America was founded on that. Unfortunately, like all things in the world, the pendulum swings back and forth. There are people who always take advantage. And those are the people, no matter what society they're in, they will always deem it their right, their birthright to take advantage. The problem is if they take advantage at the suffering of the rest of the country, they don't last long. The country was born on revolution. And it wasn't a handshake and a letter of agreement. It wasn't habeas corpus saying, okay, we're going to start another country, by British, by France. No, it was done by force. And the force was for justice. And the powers behind it all wrote a constitution, knowing full well that humans, as we know humans, are going to try to push the envelope, and the small minority are going to try to take over the majority of wealth. And so America for 250 years or so has been a just place. Statue of Liberty represents America, absolutely. However, it's the people who are out there right now who are demonstrating the injustice, what they perceive to be injustice, over the immigrants that are here today. And as we go through this time, the wheel of karma swings back and forth. If all the immigrants are chased out of the country, farm production is going to go down, manufacturing production is going to go down, consumers are going to leave, and right now what's going on is a brain drain. More medical, scientific people are leaving the country because they're getting out while the getting's good. They're gone to other countries that are welcoming them. Not too long ago, back in the 70s, it was the brain drain to the US. People from all over the world were coming in. That's what made America such a wonderful place. That's what got people from America got on the moon. That's what people from America did amazing development in scientific studies, and it became an industrial production place in the world, and everybody had a golden life at that point in time. Back in the 50s, it was fantastic. 60s were the hippies, and 70s were the inventions and going to the moon and stuff like that at the end of the 60s. So all these wonderful things were happening, but right now there's a sense of injustice and intolerance in the country. So the pendulum is swinging that way. What's going to happen is more earthquakes, more volcanic eruptions, more turmoil, until the people at the top take responsibility and govern and make the people at the bottom rich. All the great societies in history, the king made everybody in the kingdom wealthy and content, and they prospered for years and years and years. The other way around, when the king and the people at the top kept all the wealth, the society disintegrated, and the next door neighbor came over and conquered them. America has to watch out. There are enemies afoot right now that are plotting the demise of America from without and maybe from within. But to answer the question, the people who go out and demonstrate, God bless them, in their heart, if they're there because they have compassion for the cruelty and the hardship that is being inflicted upon the weak and the less defensive. I mean, the people who are undefensible and they can't go to court now. If somebody robs them, they can't go to a policeman. If something happens to them, if a policeman comes along, bad one, and takes all their money and arrests them, what can they say? And that's happening right now. There's a lot of injustices out there that's reported quietly. So what's happening? Well, the people in their heart who are putting forward this notion, like it would be to be a good Christian, a practical spiritual person, to be the Good Samaritan, to help. There is no need in my mind why people should be captured and thrown out of the country and said, okay, you have to come back. If you leave voluntarily, we'll give you $1,000 and then you can put your name in and come back. They're already here. They're doing the jobs that most people wouldn't want to do because they're back-breaking, dirty jobs. They're
Mm.
hard working jobs. But these immigrants, like all immigrants that come to a land, always take up the crappy jobs because that's what immigrants do. They get established. Then their children become professionals.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the parents get to relax and have a little bit of luxury.
Right.
So right now, if that can be put in practice where you say to people, okay, you're already here. How long have you been here? 20 years? Okay, and you've been paying taxes? Okay. Well, go over there, sign up. We'll get you that, resident card. You don't have to have a green card, but a residence card to say that, hey, you're one of us. Thank you for supporting our country for your whole, and all your kids are in university now, you say. Well, okay. And you married an American. Well, that's fantastic. Sure. Why not?
Mm. Yeah.
Otherwise, people are in fear and they're running. And they're running back to wherever they're running to, other countries, places. Fear doesn't, to answer your question, fear doesn't work. You want to create
Well, like you said
destruction in your
before, Doug.
country.
Well, like
Go
you
ahead.
said before, Doug, one extreme just means another. So, how do we get that pendulum to just kind of stay in the middle? I mean, what can we do?
Well, whatever we are going to do is going to be minuscule to what God is going to do. Okay? This is karma on a gigantic scale. The people who are causing the worst situations will themselves be inflicted by their own hand. And you can see it now with, the richest man in the world was taking money and aid away from the poorest people in the world. And he himself is an immigrant from South Africa. He also holds a Canadian passport, by the way.
Hmm.
And now it was at the top of the power and inflicting pain and suffering, and people were losing their jobs and losing their money. Well, look what happened to him. He lost his job. He was losing huge money. And the possibility of him losing government contracts is that far away. So that's the karma of God in action. I'm not trying to
Hmm.
cast blame or I'm not assuming responsibility. I'm just saying, look at the obvious. And that's the same for everybody. Nobody is above the law. People think they are temporarily, and they take advantage.
Hmm.
And what's it worth at the end of your life where you have all the money in the world and you can't buy one day longer? So the justice will happen. Out of this, the other countries in the world are starting to formulate other relationships. The dependency on America is lessening. And now sort of the balance of trade is around the world is happening. But the enemies of the US of freedom are now expanding. And totalitarian rule is more likely going to go into those places where we never expected it. But the good side is the pendulum will come back. And all the lessons that America learned when the people sat down, remember those fellows in Boston, they sat around, they said, let's make up a constitution. Where's that guy, John Hancock? We'll get him to write it up. He's a good guy. He knows how to use that electronic quill with the ink and he can get it down without making too many blotches on paper. So get him. Anyway, I'm making fun of that, but humorously saying that somebody will come along. There'll be a new um, uh, evolving of freedom. And America has more freedom than any country in the world. Any country. I live under a king. Okay.
Mm. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
The point being is that I can't say things like you can in America. I don't have the same freedoms. I don't have the same advantage. I have many of them, but my Charter of Rights, I have four freedoms and four. That's it. So the long and the
Mm.
short of it is America should be, and I guess it's like everybody else, we got it all. So do we appreciate it? Well, this is what's going to teach you to appreciate it. And out of this, in the next coming years, between now and 2030, 2034, things are going to go down and up. We're around 2028, we're going to start to go on the way up again. And all the lessons we're learning here for people that are taking advantage unethically, those holes in the Constitution are going to be plugged. And out of this America, God bless America, will hopefully be a very strong, strong society and
Mm.
back in leading of the world. But right now, You don't have to be intuitive or psychic to look around and see North Korea is on the move.
Mm.
Watch out. Russia is trying to take over Ukraine and Poland's next.
Mm.
It's not going to stop. And you have what's going on with Israeli, with the people in Gaza, which is absolutely deplorable, starving those people. I mean, the bad people were the bad people, and they should be eradicated for all the horrific things they did on that October the 7th. But the good people shouldn't be made to suffer. And now Israel is reaching out to Iran. I was talking to some people who just came back from Iran. It's terrible over there. People are trying to get out of the country
Yeah.
as fast as they can, and of course, their lives are in jeopardy. What would it like? What would we like to live like that, Les? I mean, bombs.
Yeah.
You and I doing a broadcast here, and all of a sudden we hear in the
Yep,
back.
that's what I just saw today. There was a newscast and it was coming from Iran, and as the woman was speaking, the place was under siege and she had to leave. It was horrific. But
Well,
they do say regime change is imminent there. I hope it is. I hope it's going to be a change because something's got to break.
yeah, couldn't it be done a little easier? Like, couldn't we kind of,
Yeah.
there's some other way? Well, I'm not a politician. I don't know how these powers think, but I do know it's like two street gangs warring over one another. I've often saw politicians like that. And the street gangs are warring over one another. The collateral damage is us, the good guys. But to answer the question, like what's going to happen? Well, it's going to resolve itself. There's going to be a little more trauma, but there is going to be a nuclear explosion. I've said this before. I've announced it on Coast to Coast. I've announced it on Blog Talk. We've talked about it on the Wake Up, you and I. And here we are talking about again, there will be a nuclear explosion, and that's going to stop it.
Wow. I remember Casey had once said that during the Cold War, I think he had done a reading of something, and he said that Russia would become the seat of spirituality. And I thought to myself, how is that even possible? But you read, some of the news coming out of it, it is, people are becoming more spiritual in Russia. So you think this is just part of a larger cycle that, because in ancient times, Israel, the Jewish people and the Persians were good friends in ancient times. They got along great. So do you think this is just going to all come around again and they'll return to that?
I sure hope so. But, I've announced it before. I had a vision in the future, 50 to 55 years from now, people are going to be saying, what happened in 2024? What happened? Well, why don't they know?
Hmm.
Why are they asking? I was there time traveling, so to speak, in my soul travels. So I was observing, listening, if you will. And so, why were they asking? Well, that's because the world's going to change so much. I talked about
Hmm.
to someone earlier today, and that was about what happens if we have that big bang, but it's an electrical, magnetical shock wave. You probably know the name better
An
than I.
electromagnetic pulse, whatever they call those. Yeah.
We'd be off the air, and
Yeah.
all our wonderful viewers wouldn't be able to listen to this amazing show that we're doing here.
Yeah,
And
we'd
don't
be
forget
helpless.
to
Yeah.
like and check in people and like subscribe. But anyway, all the information that's in storage in the cloud, gone. And I'll announce it again here. I had a dream where there was a big chain, like a bicycle chain with a lock on one end, and it was in the cloud circling. It hadn't linked up yet. But I took that to mean that sooner or later the cloud is going to be shut up, or shut down, or linked up, frozen. So watch out. What happens? Think about, my friends, if you're dependent on the internet for everything, wean yourself off and try to get into, having some extra food supply, etc. But have a radio, get a handheld ham set that
Yeah.
you're not dependent on this thing, that you can communicate. When was the last time you've seen somebody with a radio with batteries in it, Les?
Some time ago, I went to, it's called Battleship Cove. It's in Massachusetts. And they have it was made in Russia. It was a missile corvette. It had some of the largest cruise missiles ever used. And we got a tour of this vessel. It was very impressive. Our Navy had bought two of them, and we were lucky enough to have a tour by somebody who was in the Navy. And he said, I'm going to show you the brain of this thing. And he said, you're going to laugh when you see it. And we went down to the hold of the ship, and he had a special key, and he opened up what looked like a computer, and it looked like clockwork, just massive amounts of clockwork. And he said, this is impervious to electromagnetic pulses. That's why we bought two of them to see if we could study this. And he said in the war games they were impervious to that type of damage. He said, so what does that tell you about our so-called technology? It's
Mm.
it's vulnerable. So yeah, your suggestions of getting back to some basics is not a bad idea.
Well, for everybody listening out there, what you can do is if you think you want to, you're so good at whatever, take your cell phone and turn it off for a day. Take your
Boy.
turn it off. And just see what happens. Oh, okay, the wizard is coming back.
Yeah, we have a question from Facebook and Brian. And Brian's wondering if we can control, if the date of leaving the earth is predetermined, or can we control or change the date of our transition to the afterlife?
Oh, good question.
Yeah. It assumes like we don't have a choice, but we do. That our spiritual self, our soul mind, decides when we're going to leave. It's not arbitrary. However, there's always a disclaimer. However, accidents happen. People get diseases they ought not to. Somebody who maybe has a weak heart falls down, hits their head on a piece of furniture when that wasn't supposed to happen. So we live in a world that has real physical consequences, but generally speaking, we know we're going to die ahead of time. Our good friend Reverend Michael Irvine was in the military service a few months ago, told me that he was very sick. He had a blood disorder, and he told me he had a vision in which his old captain was coming back, and so were some of his soldier friends, and they were all dressed in uniform, and the captain was calling him, to order. And right away, I knew what that meant. He was being called home. He was going back to join his buddies. He passed away a couple months later.
Wow.
So the point being is that we always have a vision or a dream, and going home, crossing the other side of the river, seeing your relatives in front of you, and they're waiting. Come on, I'm waiting for you, and other things like that nature. Those are all indications of you're going to leave. You're going to cast off the clay, as they say. And so that particular question is: um, do we have power over the time of our death? Yes, we choose it. Because as you get older, you get to wear down. You get to be tired. The chi energy, the life force ebbs and ebbs and ebbs. And all of a sudden you say, I just want to go home. I'm done. And you pass away. So, generally speaking, you do have a choice. It's the spiritual being inside, the immortal soul decides when it's going to leave, just like it decided when it was going to enter the body. It's
Oh,
like out there in the universe is like this big slide. I've seen it, and you jump on at a certain point, and you go right down, and you end up in a physical body. And you can do that just before you're born and just after you're born. But there you are. And then you have a little bit of time to get locked in. If you don't like it, you can jump out and somebody else can jump in, or nobody jumps in, and then that's what happens with so-called crib death. So the long and the short of it is like you decide to come in, and you certainly decide when to leave. I hope
mm.
that answers our viewer's question.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine. Her mom decided she was ready to go, and the next day she went. It was amazing to watch. And she wasn't really that sick. She said, "I've had a full life. I'm ready to go now." And I said, "Okay." And I'm looking at her daughter, and she said, and went very peacefully, went in her sleep. Just she knew she was that was it. I said, "Oh my!" And then we've all seen people who refuse to leave because they're petrified to leave, and they just hang on and on and on. I thought, "Oh my God, we do have control over this."
They do, and they have the same control to stay, as you said
Mm.
so wisely. They hang on and hang on and they hang on because they're afraid. And that's
Mhm.
why you should spend some time listening to shows like ours, uh, dealing with investigation about life after death, practicing meditation and dream interpretation, learning the spiritual gifts. And so when you get to a certain point, you go like, I'm not afraid to die. I know I'm going to continue on. How I die, I might be a little apprehensive about. Okay, in all honesty, I'd like to go in my sleep. What did Red Skelton once said, asked by Johnny Carson, he said, how's your day going? What'd you do today? And without missing a beat, he said, well, every morning if I wake up and I don't see any candles and I don't smell any flowers, I get up. Okay. So listen, everybody, it's been great talking with you tonight. Please remember to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, and you can check out Douglas James Cottrell and the Soul Report online. This is Les Hubert, my good friend and co-host tonight, with the wizard behind the scene here helping us out. Jack is doing a fantastic job as usual. So again, we trust you enjoyed the Soul Report. And if tonight's conversation touched your heart, if we made some sense to you, please do us a favor, take a moment and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and you'll get notifications when we can do this. And we'll be there for you next week, every Monday at the same time, same bat channel, same bat time. Remember that Batman sign off. So I'll say good night, Les. Good night, Jack.
Good night.
See everybody later. Okay.
Did you know that Dr. Douglas James Cottrell has several other weekly channels where you can participate? Check out his Sunday International Spiritual Healing Service on Zoom. And you might also enjoy the Wake Up Podcast, exploring human consciousness, awareness, and intuition with Dr. Douglas and co-host Les Hubert. Just go to douglasjamescottrell.com and select the link to the material